Hi, everyone. We're thrilled to see you this morning to talk about membership that matters. And before my esteemed co-panelists and I get underway, we would love to know just two quick shows of hands. The first is, where are you from? And that's less about nationality and more about what sorts of organizations do you represent. So if you're a reporter or other journalist, raise a hand. If you're an editor, if you edit other people's work, you can raise your hand as many times as you like.
You're not counting.
If you work in tool development or technology, great. If you're a researcher, excellent. And if you're just a cool other person, I love it. Excellent.
Everyone raised their hands 2 and 3 times.
And the second thing that we are curious to know, because today is really intended to be a primer, we can go in depth on any of these topics sort of in the questions or afterwards, or all of us have written extensively on the internet about these ideas. But quick question for you. Who is interested in talking about workflow? Sort of how you actually integrate, how do you actualize membership? Technology. Okay. Editorial strategy. And lastly, working with your members. You are in the right place. Excellent. I'm Emily Galagoski from the Membership Puzzle Project. We are a public research project working to understand how to optimize news for trust, and we partner with Day Correspondent. One of my partners, Micah Goslinga, managing editor of Day Correspondent, is on my far right. To her left, Elizabeth Hansen, research fellow at the Shorenstein Center at the Kennedy School at Harvard University, and Mary Walter Brown, the COO of News Revenue Hub and the former publisher of The Voice of San Diego. Let's see. Very quickly, I'm just going to sort of set the table for the three of them to go a bit deeper on some of the topics you raised your hand around. I want to quickly just differentiate, because this is a topic that very often comes up when we talk about forms of reader revenue, that donation, subscription, and membership are related but distinct models. And we really want to boost sort of our shared sophistication and understanding. So I thought I'd start with some definitions. In a subscription model, audiences pay money to get access to a product or service. It's transactional. And there is not a value judgment there. This works very well for many companies around the world. Where our project is fascinated, however, is membership that looks more like joining a cause and contributing your time, energy, money, and ideas because you believe in it. And very often, you actually want to bring the knowledge that you have to bear to further that organization's reach and its journalism. Membership in its most robust represents two-way knowledge exchange, not just broadcasting between staff and members. I will just quickly share some of the news needs that we have found around the world in studying the needs of supporters of independent news. We study sites' most engaged supporters, their most loyal 1 to 10% of people, with the idea that if you can serve those people well, it has virtuous effects on everyone else you want to reach with your coverage and with your news products. I also want to mention, and my co-panelists, I think, will hopefully drive this idea home to you, that membership is resource intensive. It really does involve a lot of workflow and process considerations. It's not something that can be easily turned on and off like a brand campaign. If that is what you're interested in, I won't be offended if you get up and go. Like, what we're talking about really is sort of in its exciting infancy when we think about how do you work with your audience members. Just a few quick themes that our project has found, sort of principles when it comes to membership sites that matter and the principles that they carry out. The first is that they sort of stop what they're doing and they stand out from the news of the day. They have heard very common complaints that, news today really feels like it's just a noise vacuum, and they say, wait a minute, there's a better way that we can use people's attention and make sense of what they know. Secondly, these are sites that involve individuals, that find unique participation paths and ways to play to their strengths that sort of match those members' motivations. Thirdly, they're real. They are transparent and they find ways to be inclusive with their knowledge, to let people pass the gatekeeper in ways that are inclusive and responsible. And lastly, they make good use of their members' attention and of readers everywhere. We hear over and over again the importance of having a calming user experience that lets people come to your site to do what they set out to do, whether it's make sense of a complex news topic or pay you for your work, that they feel non-distracted and really able to carry out what it is that they came to your site, app, newsletter, SMS experience to do. And with that, Mary Walter Brown is going to go deeper in thinking about sort of this theme of loyalty and how can you more reliably create successful membership programs.
Thank you. Should I share this? Hi, I'm Mary Walter Brown. So the News Revenue Hub is a nonprofit entity itself that helps other news organizations develop, build, and manage membership programs. I was a publisher myself at Voice of San Diego, which was really the first strictly digital nonprofit news organization in the United States. And we always had membership in our DNA. The struggle was, how do you execute membership with a really small staff where everyone's wearing multiple hats and everyone's raising their hand every time you ask if you're an editor, if you're a publisher, if you work on the development team, if you're IT. So we really wanted to figure out how can we create a centralized entity that allows news organizations the opportunity to outsource some of that work so that they can really focus on building their audience and enhancing their journalism. So in essence, what we do is we provide the back-end technology and the front-end consulting and strategy to help news organizations develop a membership program. From the very beginning, that means going and meeting with them and asking them, what is your story? Like, what is the value proposition that you're offering to your audience? What promise are you making them? How are you going to craft a relationship around this promise and then deliver on it? And I'll tell you, most of the times, that is an experience that none of them have ever gone through, right? Journalists are great at telling other people's stories, but we're really bad at telling our own story. It just makes us uncomfortable. But we have great stories to tell. I mean, we're trying to save the world. We're trying to save democracy. And we have to be bold enough to be able to say that in our story, because that's the emotional connection that you're making with your reader, and that's what inspires loyalty, and that's what inspires long-term support. So these are the services we provide. We're working with over 35 news organizations around the United States. Some of them have a global audience. And what that allows us is the opportunity to have a real-time learning lab, working with all different kinds of news organizations to experiment, to gather data, to create benchmarks so that we know what should your average site traffic look like? What should your average email list size look like? How quickly should you be converting subscribers to members and retaining them? So when we first started out, they would say, well, what should my list size be? And sort of arbitrarily, we would say, well, don't come to us until you at least have 150,000 monthly uniques and a list size of 10,000, because in our mind, it was a numbers game. It was a funnels game, just like we're all used to with email marketing. But really what we found in the last 3 years of digging deeper in the data, that it's really not about the list size. It's really not a sheer numbers game. Of course, we want the top of the funnel to always be bringing in new readers, and we are going to dig more deeply into SEO and mobile responsiveness and all the things that really are important to building the top of the funnel. But what we've found definitively is it's really about the loyalty of your list, right? So it's that percentage of your email subscribers who are clicking and opening and you're a part of their daily routine. You've provided essentialness, and they can't start their day or end their day or their week without you. That's the kind of loyalty that lends itself to membership, and it's the best predictor of a successful membership program. So we dug a little bit more deeply into that. So how do you measure that loyalty? Well, our tech stack is built around MailChimp, Salesforce, and Stripe as the donation processor. So with MailChimp, for those of you familiar with it, they have a 4- and 5-star MailChimp rating for their recipients. Those are the folks that are opening the emails regularly, clicking through. Those are your super users. We found that clients that have a larger percentage of 4- and 5-star MailChimp recipients are more likely to make 3 times as much per 100 subscribers as those with a less actively engaged list. So the really important question is, how do you build loyalty among your subscribers? And that means creating products that are essential to them, that help them make better decisions, that are easy for them to consume, easy for them to share. So I think of all the ways that we need to prioritize our workflows in our newsrooms, of all those crazy decisions we need to make about maybe covering that one more story, what we need to be doing is rethinking how do we use our products to best display our content and to best serve our readers. What are they looking for, and what's the strategy behind those folks? Essentially, what we're trying to do here is build a relationship. It's as simple as that. So we visualize the relationship continuum as one where you have these random hookups, right? These are the people who are landing on your site on a daily basis from search and social. They're poking around to see if there's anybody interesting or anything interesting that might make them want to come back. You have this tiny amount of time to present them with something that can make their life easier. A once-a-week email that they can consume in 2 minutes that tells them the most important stories of the day. How do you get them to go from random hookup to committed relationship? That's an email subscriber. And then the question is, how do you deepen that relationship so you turn them into a 4- and 5-star MailChimp recipient so that they eventually are making those monthly reoccurring donations that we know remain members for 24 months as opposed to those who just give a one-time gift of, they stay a member about roughly 12 months. So I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk a little bit more about how do you develop that kind of loyalty with a product strategy.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hansen. I lead the business models for local news research at the Shorenstein Center at the Kennedy School. And I'm going to share a little bit today about some early findings from our single subject news project, which is a study that we've been running for the last almost 2 years now, funded by the Knight Foundation. And we've been working with a cohort of single subject news sites. So these are sites that are either investigative or have a single policy focus to try to help them build, engage, and monetize their audiences. And the reason why this is interesting to us is that these guys are mostly funded by foundations, and many of them are just in the early stages of building their membership programs. And they have some interesting kind of strategic issues around how do they find niche audiences, but then also get their content beyond the folks who are just interested in like the policy topic itself. So what I'm going to share with you comes out of this study, but we think it's pretty broadly applicable. Let's see, next slide. So we've organized our research around mapping the audience funnel. So to Mary's point, how do we get the audiences into the top of the funnel through, through search in particular, down through the funnel using email newsletters, and then converting them to members. All right, so I want to share a little bit about the SEO work we've done. So over the last year, we worked with these guys using Moz tool to try to understand to what extent were they already optimizing and what could they do to get their search in order. And what we found, interestingly, so there was a lot of kind of technical issues, and we've published about this, and I'm happy to share it more in depth. But what was really interesting is that the most important problems they had to face in SEO were actually strategic and organizational. So we really encouraged them to think about, like, what do you want to be known for? Before you can have a really robust, keyword strategy and build it into your publishing workflow, you really have to understand, like, where does your content sit in relationship to similar news organizations? What do you think your users are going to be looking for on social when they're coming to you? And with that set of questions, then you can go and generate a set of keywords that then you can build into a workflow. So the other whole set of problems was around, like, who is going to do this? So who's going to be responsible for tracking these keyword opportunities? Who's going to be making sure that when you partner with other news organizations that those SEO optimized links are working correctly? So what we found is that the news organizations that we worked with that could really tackle these strategic and organizational issues actually ended up being able to boost their organic search traffic by a significant amount. So we were pretty pleased with the results of this part of SEO. The other big part of our work with these guys has been around email newsletters. So we just published a guide in September that's taken everything we've learned and shared it for those who are interested in kind of going beyond the basics of email newsletters. So I'm gonna run through some high-level principles, but I encourage you to check out the site, and I'm happy to talk about it more. All right, so six lessons about email and audience growth. So one of the reasons why we were so excited about using email newsletters in this study is that it's really one of the best tactics to capture and retain the attention of readers, as Mary was talking about. And really importantly, it's it's a platform that you can control. So during the course of this project, we saw Facebook tweak its algorithm. We saw some kind of mixed results in social referrals to our cohort. And in the midst of this, we kept saying to them, like, guys, this is why it's really important that you pay attention to your email newsletter audience, because these are readers that you have a direct relationship with. And what we see is that when these newsrooms are able to craft a smart email newsletter strategy, they can both maintain their core group of readers while also reaching out beyond those folks to grow their audience. But it's really important to keep in mind, and I think both Mary and Emily teed this up, that using email newsletters to build audience and generate revenue is really as much an editorial practice as it is a technical and financial one. So some of the interesting differences we've seen in our cohort, we had engagement and membership folks coming and working with us, and the people who reported up through the development teams, they tended to take a more technological and financial orientation to newsletters. And then we had some engagement teams that were solidly in the editorial side, and they tended to think about email newsletters purely editorial terms. And part of the work of our cohort has been to help those teams try to think about email newsletters cross-functionally. So what's a strategy that combines, the editorial stickiness that's going to build the reader loyalty with a set of financial measures to actually understand if what you're doing is working. And this is, back to what Mary and Emily were saying, readers will give you money for something they value. So the point is to build products that are valuable to your readers, and then to ask them for money. I was really surprised amongst our cohort, the kind of reticence amongst some of them to ask for support. And in the nonprofit arena, there are other membership programs where people ask and ask and ask and ask, and we often make the analogy to public media organizations, which do an amazing job of communicating over and over and over and over again with their listeners for support. So we've really tried to encourage in our cohort that asking on a regular basis. Okay, and then finally, so especially amongst our cohort, these are very small newsrooms. They're resource constrained. They don't have a lot of people. What we've tried to encourage them to do is to think of every action related to email as linking back to some broader organizational goal. So, like, yes, you don't want to just indiscriminately, spam your list. I mean, sometimes we field concerns about that. But to really be thoughtful about what it is you're doing and why in that email channel. And then finally, we've also encouraged them that there's really significant power in pooling resources, and this is the power of organizations like the Hub that are able to work with lots of newsrooms simultaneously. Like, you don't have to go it alone, and for some of these strategies, it's better not to. And then really quickly, I just want to talk about one final piece of our work, which has been to try to build a new set of email metrics that can actually give you some insight into loyalty and engagement. We published a pretty wonky data science tools for email audience analytics, which you are welcome to go through. But we've also built it into an email benchmarking tool. So this is a tool that you can use if you're MailChimp, you're on MailChimp, you can input your API key. And what it does is give you a different set of email metrics that we think are actually more attuned to loyalty and engagement. So you can see this is the distribution of open rates. On the left are the folks who open your email newsletter 0% of the time, and on the right, oops, sorry, Keep going. Keep going. One more. Thank you.
I just was
You were so captivated by email newsletter metrics. I know, it's fascinating stuff. And on the right are the folks who open 80, 90, 100% of the time. So this is to really give you a view into the distribution of loyalty on your list. The next one. And then this is just another percentage of subscribers who did not open in the last 365 days. So this gives you a sense of like, where's the dead wood on your list? On the left would be your list metrics, and then on the right would be the benchmarking average. And then what are the percentage of subscribers who open more than 80%, and how does that compare to the average? So this kind of gets you beyond crude measures of open rates to get a sense of like where the loyalty is on your list. So finally, I just want to go back to, so Emily and I, a year ago, published this guide to audience revenue and engagement, and this was at the beginning of her time at the membership puzzle. It was before I had come to Shorenstein, and I think at the time we sort of didn't quite know what we had hit upon. Like I think we thought it was important, but I think the fascinating thing for me in doing this work over the last year has been to see all of the things that we wrote about in this guide really come to life in different parts of the ecosystem. And what we really took away from that and wanted our readers to take away from that is understanding that audience engagement and audience revenue strategies are deeply entwined, and you really can't think about one without the other. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Micah.
Thank you. I feel a little bit like a puppy when I listen to you because it's so technical, and that's exactly the thing we have not quite figured out yet at The Correspondent, but it's very interesting. I'm actually going to talk about the editorial point of view, so it's very different from what you've been doing, but I'm hoping that I can show you what it means to work with members and what that means for your organization. And it's going to be quite shallow because I only have 5 minutes, but if you have any questions, let me know afterwards. I'll be in a panel tonight as well about this. So yeah, we could be talking about membership for hours. We've talked about the technology, and I think we should also look at it from a more human point of view. So we see membership as something that involves human beings who interact with you and who trust you and who like to give you your money because they think you make cool journalism, but also because they know that you as a journalist take them seriously. So we at The Correspondent put a lot of work in gaining the trust of those members. And to tell you a little bit about The Correspondent, we started in 2013, and now we have about 62,000 members for our Dutch organization. We recently did a crowdfunding campaign for an English language expansion of The Correspondent, which is going to launch in September 2019 this year. And for that, we have about 50,000 members already from 130 countries, which is really cool. I don't know if there are supporters among this crowd, but thank you. We do investigative journalism analyses, but I think what makes us stand out most is that our journalists work with a public notebook, so they share their progress on what they're working on. And we invite readers to join them along the way and follow their steps into, their journalism process. So the important thing here is that the journalism actively engages in a debate with members. And this is one very obvious example. So this is our correspondent fashion industry or clothing. And she, through a call out on her website, asks members if they can help her with her research. So here she's asking, do you know any examples of fashion brands that throw away clothes? So she is doing research into landfill because of clothing, the clothing industry. And usually reporters or our correspondents who all have a different beat, they get several dozen, sometimes hundreds of responses from our members or people who join our website, so they contribute beneath the piece. And we actually invite experts to do that. And share their expertise with members, with other members beneath a piece. This is the most obvious examples, but engagement of members comes in very different flavors. And I'm sorry, Emily, that I did this annoying slide thing where you have to click every time. So I would see it as some kind of engagement continuum. So below the ladder, you have people who read and share articles. Then you have people who follow correspondence on our site. But you also have people who follow our correspondence personal newsletters, and they all have their own tone of voice. So there's no standard newsletter, but each correspondent can design their newsletter as they wish. There's members who attend public events, or they send mails with tips. So as you can see, we're getting to the more engaged folks as we progress. People can respond to pieces. We verify people on our site. So if, for example, last week we had a piece on universities, and politicians, other experts, people who work at universities, they actually responded beneath the piece to debate what we were discussing in the article. And we try to verify these people so you know who's sharing their experience. So we really like to encourage that debate, and we verify them. People also join private events, so sometimes we have really large data sets, and we try to invite people to help us clean those data sets. That works really well, and it also results in articles. We also have members who gift memberships, and people who proofread articles. So there are members who have a certain expertise, and they can really contribute to the reporting by reading the piece before it gets published. So that is also a level of engagement that we've seen. And lastly, some members have ended up writing articles. Of course, this goes through an entire editorial process, but it just shows that membership comes in very different flavors. So you can go to the next slide. Of course, we learned some lessons here. Especially that it takes a lot of time. But not every member does everything, and that's fine. You don't have to have every member write an article. The thought kills me because it would mean 60,000 pitches, but that it's fine. Of course, you're trying to make people get higher up that ladder, but it's fine if they just share the word. And the same goes for employees. Some people really like sharing what they learned in their personal newsletters, others not so much. They prefer to engage with an audience, maybe at events or in different ways. And it's fine, we don't have a formula that fits all. Our correspondents have also said they feel really overwhelmed because you get a lot of information when you ask for it, and sometimes the information is not even that good. So you need to be very specific when you do a call out, the one I showed earlier, that you say what is a good tip and what is a bad one. And that really changes the input you get generally. Of course, you'll get some things that are not that great, but hey, that's our job as journalists. You also need new jobs at your organization. So, for example, we have a conversation editor. What she does is she invites experts to the debate so that people actually want to read on and contribute after a piece has been published, and even the contributions of these people lead to new articles. And it's her job to invite these people. We also have a verification editor who helps her verify these people, an engagement editor who helps correspondents with their newsletters, and an email flow. And for the correspondent and the correspondent, we're hiring people also in roles that we don't even know how, well, we know kind of what these people have to do, but they don't exist yet, I think. So we are hiring a membership director and a membership support manager. So we need these roles because we are working with members and we want to gain their trust, and you need dedicated people on that. But most importantly, it is a cultural commitment. We've also worked with people who are like, gosh, do I have to talk to readers? These people exist, but they're not a good fit with our organization. So you need to hire people who believe in that cause, in your cause. So yeah, I also put it, if you want to be a membership director, if you have, you can go to our website, jobs.thecorrespondent.com. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think a great overview from these three, sort of on the program design, on the email, and on the editorial side. So thank you all. What questions do you have for this group? Also, there are more seats. If people are looking for seats, there's a couple up here.
Hi, I have a question for Maaike mostly, but also the rest of you, maybe you can bring other examples. What I'm wondering about is whether, and that doesn't seem to be part of the membership conversation, and I wonder whether it's something that you've thought about, are we risking sort of further creation of bubbles and polarization? And what are the editorial safeguards you can put in place to make sure that you retain your freedom to piss off your community when you're creating a membership model? And I would be very curious, like, how much of that conversation is happening when newsrooms are setting up the membership programs?
We're asking ourselves a question all the time, and I think there's two ways we're trying to solve it. One is inviting experts to debate that don't necessarily agree. This is really difficult, but that's why we have a conversation editor who tries to get them to criticize the article beneath the piece or share their remarks. And the second one is that we introduce a pay what you can model for the correspondent, which means that you pay on the basis of what you want to pay for it. And what you think we deserve as an organization. So I think that lowers the barrier for most people who can't usually afford subscriptions for or memberships for 6 different organizations, but rather they can give us a smaller amount of money and have access to our journalism.
Just to add a few thoughts to that, we're really curious as researchers about almost the concept of paying in participation. So are there ways that you can give your time and your talents and potentially have your membership underwritten by someone else, right? We think a great deal about equity considerations in that way. 2 other thoughts. I think there is no one more naturally skeptical of the agenda that someone brings than reporters and editors. So actually they're a great fit for people who have relevant knowledge, to treat it just as you would any other source information. This is not to say that your members get some sort of special favor over the editorial. If anything, it's democratizing the voices that you're listening to. Is anyone from Reveal, from the Center for Investigative Reporting here? They had an example of a project that they tried recently called their Hate Sleuths project that they sort of incubated in our Join the Beat community of practice with beat reporters. And 2 of their reporters who were working on following the alt-right in America said, you know, we have a very engaged email audience. Reveal is also a News Revenue Hub client. And this is really working. People are really excited about what we're doing. We wonder if we could tap some of their enthusiasm and interest to actually benefit the reporting. And so they put out a call for people to apply to join the group of hate sleuths to help us investigate hate. And they got applications from all over the country, ended up verifying the backgrounds of 40 different individuals from a wide range of professional areas of expertise and training them on sort of, you know, what is it that's most helpful, whether it's filing FOIA requests or dividing up detailed research into sort of bite-sized chunks that people in disparate cities might be able to undertake together. And that project actually has a coordinator at the center, so sort of getting to some of what Micah was speaking about. Think of it as 2 reporters working with a coordinator who's working with 40 people who are trained in the reporter's methods. So everything is verified, fact-checked. It's just that it's collected with the input of a group of knowledgeable people. And I think that examples like that are ones that we're really curious about around how might working with a knowledge community scale for reporters who are especially on deadline.
I think that's a really good question, and we heard a lot of conversation in our group because they're focused on, policy, some of them on policy issues around particularly, messaging to their members and, getting people into the funnel, like what's the language that they can put out there that, signifies interest but doesn't like tip over into advocacy. And for many of them, they have pretty strict editorial policies around what they want to say and not say in their own kind of like gut sense. So, the kinds of decisions that they have to make in terms of coverage, then they also were making in terms of like, what's the messaging to memberships, but it's difficult.
Question right here in the front.
Hi, thank you all. I have more of a skills and staffing question. So our newsroom in Romania is very reliant on our community, both in terms of the editorial work that we do, but also in terms of participation and revenue. But most of that work, as Elizabeth said, both on the revenue and on the engagement side, is done by our editorial staff. Because in our part of the world, it's like having other people from other industries into newsrooms is difficult. So that's worked for a while, and thankfully it's worked and we've grown, but now our editorial staff feels like every day they're doing things that they're not good at. So from your experience, what kind of other people can we bring into newsrooms? Because our team is talking about, well, do we need digital marketers? Do we need SEO specialists? Do we need developers? They cost a lot of money. Because we feel like we have a good feel of how to do it, but the technical aspects are becoming more and more complicated as our membership program is successful.
Yeah. It's such a hard problem.
I think I get that question once a week. Like, we're going to hire one person on our development team. Who should it be? I think it should be somebody with email marketing capabilities, somebody who understands analytics, someone who can inspire experimentation, try to create new products, measure their effectiveness, tweak it. I mean, I think you're going to get the most bang from your buck if you have somebody that has that type of skill set. And then it's just about building credibility and relationships within the newsroom so that you can create products that they can use. But I think rather than going out and finding a fundraiser, finding an email marketing person is going to get you a little bit further.
Yeah, I would definitely underline that. And what we found in our cohort is actually some of them left to join other newsrooms in the cohort because they had they were having such a hard time. Yeah. They were having such a hard time finding people. The good thing is that I think it's a skill set that you can also pick up pretty quickly. So getting someone in the door who even has a piece of it, they can learn the rest of it. And now between all of our projects, there's a lot of publicly available information. So you don't also need to find someone whole cloth, and you may not be able to.
In the center.
Now I took it, sorry. Just want to say thank you for bringing some hope into this and some great examples. And I don't know if it's putting out the hope, but could you talk a little bit also about the business models? I mean, what does it actually mean when it comes to the bottom line? Is that something you can reveal some of the good examples?
Yeah, I could speak to that. I mean, what we're seeing in the U.S. is the healthiest business model for a local news site per se is 4 revenue streams. It's typically foundations, major donors, membership, so that's usually quantified as 5,000 and below, and major donors are 5,000 and above. And then sponsorships and advertising. And so, you know, you really want to still have that earned income, predictable revenue stream, something that you actually can count on. Obviously, these are for nonprofit news organizations for the most part, but if you can get 50% of your revenue coming from individuals, be it members at a lower level and major donors, that's a pretty healthy revenue stream.
Just a quick plug for a research tool that's available to all of you. We have a membership and news database on membershippuzzle.org with well over 120 organizations around the world that have membership as all or part of their revenue. With, I would say, the bulk of those organizations having membership make up a quarter or less of overall revenue. I think that that will grow, but the idea that you will see if you dig into that data set is that these organizations are not trying to extend themselves in directions that take time away from the editorial. So none of them have a wine club, for example. The idea is that any of their programs sort of speak back to what it is that they're uniquely good at. What is it that their coverage brings that no other entity in the world is as good at as they are? And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
So I like to think about it as, in the US, the public radio model, which is like a third memberships, a third sponsorship, underwriting, and a third major gifts, philanthropy. And you know, some of the public radio organizations in the US can be $30 million and above. So, you know, those are organizations that have built up that capability over time, but it is possible at a scale beyond, you know, some of the tiny organizations we're talking about.
I think you had a question.
Hi, so I have a question potentially for Maaike. I wanted to ask you, so you spoke about the ultimate way to involve your readers through even before publication of your story, asking them about their knowledge. What's your experience with competitors potentially stealing a story? And are there situations for stories, maybe more investigative way, where you decide, in this case, we're not going to ask them up front to avoid that situation?
This question is always asked. It's because journalists are afraid that someone will steal their story, but that has never happened, actually. And another thing is that, of course, I understand that if you have a big scoop about the Pentagon, you won't share it before actually publishing. But there are ways of doing it. It's a bit difficult to show now without examples, but usually they're actually the starting point for investigative stories. So a good example is a story that my colleague did on the Royal Dutch Shell, Dutch company, Dutch-British, and he wanted to know what it's like to work for Shell. So he did a call out and asked our members, did you work for Shell or are you still working there? And could you tell me more about your job and what it's like to work for a company that's responsible for so much pollution, basically? And he got a lot of people actually sharing information with him, and he published these interviews with 13 people or so that he talked to with different viewpoints. And eventually, as the investigation or the whole journalism project progressed, people would send him more tips about Royal Dutch Shell. And eventually we ended up with a big investigative story on how Shell knew about climate change all along. They published about it in the 90s and they failed to act upon their own warnings. So a lot of people ask me, is membership and asking for input in advance possible with investigative stories? But I think it works if you don't know where you're going to end up yet. Or if you should have a direction, of course. You can't just say, hey, give me tips about, I don't know, pollution. But if you have that direction, I think the rest will follow. Not all the time, but yeah.
Paul, in the back. Also, if you have a question, please just introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Paul from On Our Radar, and I'm really excited about the possibility of membership to kind of increase participation and increase engagement with communities who are readers. But one sort of concern I have is I wonder, from your experience, is this participation, does it tend to come from community members who already have the time and the bandwidth and the confidence and the expertise to be, to be shaping these stories and to be participating in these stories, and therefore do we risk recreating some of the same kind of power structures that we have in traditional media, or are you seeing examples of diversification and of different stories coming from different communities and of rich participation, either in your organizations or in the organizations that you've come across?
Micah, if you want to start, I have some thoughts too.
Yeah, it is a thing we talk about, because at some point we felt that as if only 1% of our community was talking and beneath the same piece again and again and again. So we had to change that. And I think you can do that in multiple ways, but one is actually inviting people that you interview to the debate and letting them feel almost like a co-owner of their story. So a really good example is one of my colleagues did a series on holiday homes, because more and more people are actually living in holiday homes, and which is not entirely legal. It's like a gray area. But he invited the people who are, usually they're not in our circles. He invited them to debate beneath the piece, and they felt they wanted to reply to people who had questions and engage in the debate and combat stereotypes about them that people expressed in the contribution section. And they shared the articles with other people living in these holiday homes. So I think that's just one way where you can combat it, but it's definitely something you have to actively work on. Otherwise you'll end up with the same people commenting. Yeah, absolutely.
Just one other, I would answer your question with a question, which is, what are the size of the asks that you are going to people with? So are there a range of opportunities that they have that have sort of different involvement and sort of literacy levels? For your most engaged people, the people you see all the time, they may have more time and talent to bring to the project, sort of, and we see this also, that's not just for journalism, that is in many analogous spaces, environmental cooperatives, sports clubs, religious groups, and the like. I think also about how can you create specific asks. ProPublica does this really well, tapping into the lived experiences and the professional expertise of their reader base. And Corrective in Germany, with their Who Owns Hamburg and Who Owns Other German Cities project, had really simple asks for people to take photos of the property documentation so that they could really get a sort of cohesive and really robust picture of who held the property deeds in the city, which is information they couldn't gather without their readers. So I think sometimes involvement and participation, we're acting as if we're asking people to sign their life away to us. I would actually flip that. Like, what is the way that people can express their own motivations to be heard, to show their passion for your idea, to be granted transparency into your work? How can we match that with a right size participation activity that's significantly meaningful? In the back, in the green sweater.
Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm not a journalist, but more from the design and product view. I just want to refer to the one screen where it was about the relationship. I really appreciate it. But I think it was just not really finished, because I missed one thing, because like it's the marriage, but then the other work starts, like you want to prevent the divorce, actually. Yeah. So we heard a lot about this from the correspondent, like how members engage and stuff like this. But of course, there will be some, members leaving the news outlet again. So my question is like, did you already learn something about this churn? Did you have any insights about like how to prevent this, what are the pain points of these people, like what are they disappointed about?
I mean, one of the things, obviously retention is absolutely just as important as recruitment. And with our program, we build member benefits specifically around retention and not about recruitment. We found that people are going to give whatever amount they can afford. But how we deepen that relationship and really focus on retaining them are through the benefits, the products, the experiences, the access that we give to those members, to simply remind them that we value them and that we're working hard with their hard-earned dollars. So that takes a lot of different forms depending on the newsroom and their abilities to execute benefits, but it ranges from member coffees to happy hours to just even a simple monthly, what we call a timely topical email, which is just, here's a story, here's the impact it has on the community, and this is what we're doing with your investment, so that they actually retain this idea that I am a member, and it's not like 12 months later we ask you to renew because you're a member, and they're like, what's a member? I just gave you $50. I don't know what that means. So it's just a constant cultivation of that relationship, and the simplest way is just with an email once a month, and the more elaborate and deeper ways are by some of the things that the correspondent is doing by using them as sources and expertise. But also we found that it can be much simpler than that. People are really yearning for just opportunities to get together in a space, in a community, and talk about the issues that are important to them. We used to over-program those events quite a bit. 80% would be a panel discussion, and 20% would be the part where they get to talk to one another. And we'd have to shoo them out the door after 20 minutes because it was over, and they're like, that's the part I like. So we flipped it. Now it's 20% programming and 80% giving people the opportunity to talk to one another and hash out ideas. I think we're getting our time signal, our time cue.
One more. We'll take one more. That's also helpful for Perugia next year to think about how we might.
We'll be back with more.
Was there, oh.
Yeah, there's some.
That was a false promise, I'm sorry. The four of us will be around. Thank you so much, and looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you.
There's another panel tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'm just quickly plugging tomorrow's panel at 10 a.m. where we're talking